So I am going to read part of a very small part of Maple Lane, which is the essay that Heather told you a little bit about. And it is the ultimate narcissistic essay because it's an essay about being born. I was born, literally, I was born in Pittsburgh in September 1945, right at the end of the Second World War. And I was born as what is called a collodion baby, which is to say I had a sheath of skin around my whole body. I kind of looked like a turkey in plastic wrap. And the reason for that is that I have a genetic disorder. So the skin cells don't shed normally. They pile up on the surface, even in the womb. So I was born a very sickly child. I hasten to add, I have had some medication since then that has helped me a lot. But this is a recessive problem like blue eyes. So the parents don't usually know, my parents certainly didn't know that their baby was going to be born with this difficulty. My mother, who lived to be 100, told this story about my birth again and again and again. And one night, part of what she told was that in Pittsburgh in 1945, there weren't enough nurses in the hospital to feed me. And I had a twin brother who was not affected by this difficulty. And so she decided, what was she going to do? How was she going to help these children? And I thought, oh, she's making this up. This is self-aggrandizement, which is kind of like her. But no, I went back to Pittsburgh as a good nonfiction writer. I did my research, and I saw in the annual report in 1946 at Allegheny General Hospital that she was right. The nurses had the number of nurses on the floor to look after kids was very small because the nurses were all off looking after veterans who had just come home from World War II. So she was right about that. One of the other things that she told me when I was an adult, looking back on my birth, was she said to me, I could have let you die when you were born. No one would have blamed me. Well, that was hard to hear. And I thought to myself, why did she not let me die? And she would never answer that question, even when I asked her about it. She was very cagey. So when I wrote this essay, and it's a long essay, so I'm only going to read part of it. One of the things that I tried to understand was why did she make the decision that she did? Because she wouldn't talk to me in the middle of an essay, which is basically nonfiction, there is a part which is frankly fictional. So that's what I'm going to read to you this evening. This happens in a suburb of Pittsburgh in 1945. Tall, deciduous trees beginning to turn yellow swayed over the sidewalks on Maple Lane on October the 5th, the afternoon my mother came home to a suburb downstream on the Ohio River, 12 days after giving birth to her twins. 2 blocks away, the main line of the Pennsylvania Railroad ran parallel to the river, carrying troops home from the European War. My father, a lawyer for the railroad, brought her into the green shingled house, and they waited to see what would happen in my incubator in Allegheny General Hospital. What went on in that house during those long October weeks? My mother has given me no detailed reminiscences, so I have to root my way back into my parents' emotions and thoughts as they waited. Although nothing is more mysterious than the inner workings of a marriage, even to, perhaps especially, to a child of that marriage who has never married herself. I imagine these scenes because I want to know how they felt about me when I was an infant. because I'm pursued by my mother's comment about being so ambivalent, she could have let me die when I was born. Her feelings that no one would have blamed her. Scenes flash through my mind's eye. Monday night, October 22nd, 1945, Maple Lane. Facing the only window in a gabled room, she pulls on the metal wheel of her sewing machine. As she feels the needle puncture the seam of an infant's sleeve, she hears her husband come in from the bedroom. He pauses in the doorway. "Sewing burial clothes?" he asks. He leans against the door frame and ties his flannel bathrobe around his compact hips. "Oh, Ed, really?" The comment surprises her. Is he making a bitter joke? If so, it's not like him. By nature, he's an optimistic man. She depends upon it. "What am I supposed to do?" she says. "Why even think about burying my children? No one else does." He regrets it immediately. "Oh, Pat, I didn't mean." The night air blowing across her table ruffles her pattern. What would her life be like anyway, Anne's life? He lifts his eyebrow, clenches his teeth. He can't answer her. She pushes the pedal again, feeling the motor thrum on the sole of her foot. Looking down at the blue sleeve, she says, "I don't know why this had to happen to us." He notices scratch marks on her left hand. When she's nervous, she sometimes rakes it till it bleeds. He's never sure how to comfort her, but he knows the doctors will never let her handle Anne with an open wound. She waves her left wrist, making no attempt to hide the marks, and asks him to hand her some silk thread. He walks behind her, smelling her face powder, a hint of cologne. What's the brand, he wonders? Something French. She was the first woman he'd met who wore real French perfume. He hands her the thread, then sits in the deep corner chair under the eaves. There's no way to make her care that thread is rare in wartime. She takes the blue spool off the top of the singer. They weigh less now, the kids do, than when they were born a month ago. Isn't that always true with new babies, he asks. She jerks her body forward on the red vinyl chair, rethreads the needle. She looks awful, Ed. Those scales, they wouldn't let me touch her today. He rouses himself. I guess the hospital's afraid of infection, Pat. What might be brought in? By me, you mean? He lifts his eyebrows quickly. By anyone from the outside. Eddie, my little boy, he makes tiny sounds, she says. Folds his leg up under his chest. She pushes her chair back, digs her hand into the pockets. What can we do, Ed? There are children, could be our only children. She turns and looks straight at him, but he flicks his eyes away. Pretty soon she'll be pacing, asking why this had to happen to her. He hates this kind of mood, and the last thing he wants is a discussion about why they haven't had children before. At first, he was glad she didn't get pregnant right away. Later, he suggested she talk to her doctor. It was easy to accept the doctor's advice to be patient. He watches her change threads and start on a pink jacket. Drumming 3 fingers in the air, he remembers how his own mother mourned his 2 older siblings who died before he was born. She insisted he mention them when she heard his prayers at night in the little room upstate in coal country. She'd tell him he had a look like his dead brother, only she'd whisper, "You're a fine, handsome lad yourself, my boy, aren't you now?" He can still hear her slight Irish cadence. His father could never console his mother for the children she'd lost. God knows I don't want Pat to feel that way, he thinks. On his feet now, he fiddles the fingers of his right hand as if he were playing an invisible piano chord. It'll be risky to bring her home too soon, Pat. Who said I was thinking of that? She lights a cigarette, inhales, then grinds it out. I don't know what to think. He straightens up. Have you called around about hiring a nurse? He knows it's always better to give her something practical to do. When Anne's better, you could get someone in here to help. Maybe Mrs. Rooney, who looks after that flock of nephews of yours, the little hooligans running wild down in Squirrel Hill. She might have a friend or something. His hand is on the doorknob. Give it a whirl. She hears him close the door behind him to blot out the clatter of the sewing machine. He hates noise, she thinks, and he won't fight. She knows he dislikes anything like a scene. Bending over her task again, she reaches for the back of the pink jacket. Heaven knows when I could put this on, little Anne, she thinks. She remembers seeing plaques of thick skin modeling her baby's thighs. I can't bear to think of how much it must hurt her, she thinks, that tight skin. She pulls away from the machine for a minute. Might it be better if she died looking like that? What kind of life would she have? No man would want her. She leans in again, works the pedal. I'm only 32, she thinks. I can have more children. That's what people say. You can have more children. Then she stops sewing and throws her head back. But what if we don't? With the heel of her hand, she polishes a clean spot on the table. Face facts, Pat. This was your first pregnancy in 5 years of marriage. She scrapes her metal chair along the pine floor, gets up, goes down the staircase, out the front door, down the porch steps, moving quickly into the late October night. She's vaguely aware of shimmering porch columns. A large dogwood tree shakes purple leaves in the wet breeze. She strides past it, twists off a clump of red berries as she goes. What if I never get pregnant again? What if this is our only chance? She walks across the grass towards the driveway, kicking up divots with the toe of her shoe. The boy will survive, she thinks. I didn't do anything wrong there. All he needs is to be fed. She scrapes her open-toed shoe back and forth along the bricks that line the driveway, letting her hair fall in place. It's Anne, that cracked skin. What if it's something She pushes the thought down, jerks her body upright. Look at Eddie, she says out loud. He's proof enough. She walks a few feet along the driveway. I could just leave her there, let her take her chances. No one would blame me. She tosses the berries aside, starts to scratch her left hand, but stops herself, digs her hands into the slanted pockets of her dress. That baby seems to have a will of her own. A smile creeps across her broad teeth. She laughs quietly, kind of like you, Pat. She brushes the low branch of a white pine, scattering raindrops. Suddenly, she feels elated. I can do it. She throws her long brown hair back and opens her face to the light rain, letting it sink into her cheeks. Then she shakes the wet out of her hair and walks along the driveway towards the street. All I have to do is get them home, where we can feed them. She pushes down the thought that she might not be able to tend a baby who's as sick as her daughter. Ed, my husband, he may protest. I'll just explain it to him. At the end of the driveway, she slows down. Maybe the skin problem won't last, she says. Anyway, we'll find doctors, take her to Philadelphia, to New York. She paces down the sidewalk for a few yards, hearing the wind rush through the tops of the maple trees. Then she turns towards the house, walking quickly up to the porch, past the white columns. After all, she thinks, it's only dry skin. So that's the end of the excerpt. And she went back to Allegheny General Hospital. She took a laundry basket, a wicker laundry basket lined with newspapers. She brought my brother home. He gained weight. And she went back for me very triumphantly. Thank you very much.